Three, two, one. Greetings, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon if you're on the East Coast. I have our esteemed guest today. We have Dr. David Imhotep as promised, and he is the author of Africans Were the First Americans. And for some reason, I was not able to get the copy of his book cover up, but I will make sure that we have that for you before the end of the day. If not, we'll email it and have you. Oh, good. Good. This is a copy of his revised edition. And Dr. Hoptep, let me ask you a question from the beginning. Uh, your new book. I know you first started this. How long have you, in fact, how long have you been in this area of work?
Since I'd say 2000, oh no, it was since '85 because I was Ali's nutritionist until his last fight, which was '82, and then I went back to school and
Muhammad
got my
Ali.
yes, Muhammad Ali.
Okay, very good,
Yeah,
very good.
I was with him his last 7 fights.
You're well rounded, brother. You're well rounded. Good.
My one trick pony.
Good,
Yeah,
good.
so I went back to school and got my my graduate degrees, the master's and the PhD in ancient African history,
Okay.
and so that was 2002 that I started out, and then I finished my work um, in 2010, and I started writing the first edition a little before that, and then 2011 came out with the first edition, and this second edition is um, is twice as large. It has over 400 pictures. I'm sorry, 400. It's double the size of the first book. This one has 420 or 15 or 20 some pictures. It has approximately 1,000 footnotes, and instead of um, what was it, 14 pictures like the first edition, it has 49 photos in this new one, and it will be out sometime this fall. The new edition.
Okay, I'm gonna bring you back on screen live, and then we'll get back because I want our audience to be able to observe both of us as we speak about this area.
I can
Okay.
see both of us like we wanted. I can see
Okay,
myself and you.
excellent. Good, good,
So
good, good, good. Well, Doctor, I wanted to we want to go into this because this area of political identity is such a a a a terrible convoluted area for the average Africans in America, of African descent. We have all of these names: Negro, colored. Then there's the myth that we only came to these shores in 1619. And so, and we that's been drummed into to our psyche that we're just recent immigrants and recent that I don't even want to use the word immigrants, recent captives doing the transatlantic slave trade, the Mayat.
not
Uh,
just 1619 were we bought, not until then, but we were bought here not as free men or associates of the whites. We were bought here as slaves. That's the picture they want for us to grab and believe that there were no Africans in America until good old Christopher Columbus brought some slaves over in 1619. Nothing could be further than truth. And we'll go into that a little later.
All right, all right. Well. Good. This is the reason why we're here is because we want to explain who we are, how we arrived, and in your estimation and in your study work, please elaborate on what you perceive in your studies and your research has shown has been the first migrations of Africans into the Americas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll go into that a little deeper when we get into about halfway through the presentation.
Okay, well, go ahead. You have the floor. Start. Go
At
ahead.
the floor? How about the
Yeah.
walls and the ceiling?
Okay, very good.
Okay, all right, folks. First of all, I want to thank this brother for the phenomenal job that he's doing, and not just in this work, but the great lawyer that he is, and the great cases he's won, and just he's not a one trick pony either. So you got two brothers here who do a few things that are different than most people. So I'll jump right into this. Of course, my name is Dr. David Imhotep. I have the first PhD in ancient African history. There are degrees in African American history, but this is the first degree rendered to anyone in the field of ancient African history. So people say, well, where'd you get that degree from? Well, I got my PhD from American National University in Roanoke, Virginia. Let me see.
Right.
I'm sorry. That's where I taught, where I retired from. Donsbach University is where I got my PhD degree in Cincinnati. So you all you have to do if you want to see more information about me and my credentials and what I did before becoming a professor and writing books about ancient African history. And that would be I was a nutritionist, and like you saw, I was Muhammad Ali's nutritionist for his last 7 fights. So, changing gears today on this show, we must tell you that that to attain reparations is not easy. Okay, reparations come with a lot of baggage, but it will be done, and they will be made if this brother and I have anything to do with it. And about the reparations, though, you have to prove things in this world. So
Mhm.
we have to show that we were here before anyone else on the planet.
Yes.
Okay, so that's where the reparations will start.
And
So
could I interject? Uh,
at
could
any
I
time you can go.
could
Yes,
I just interject this?
at any time.
The reason why we love you as lawyers so much, Dr. Imhotep, is because much of the reparations case, what is to be repaired, is who we are.
Hmm.
And we have this concept in law, in international law, and in international reparations law, of restoration, to restore us back to who we were prior to the crime that's
Hmm.
being committed. And so your research gives us that indigenous aspect that would allow us to have land reparations.
Hmm.
And what we've done with your work and Dr. Winter's work is when we filed in the United Nations, we used your work and Dr. Winter's work as a buttress to our argument that we are indigenous to these lands, and so when we made our filing, we actually put all of the land of the United States into dispute. And so, and it was based upon your research and Dr. Winter's research that offered proof that we were here prior to the colonialists. And that's all we really have to do. But you're going to go back much farther. You're going to go much farther than that to show our attachments to the land. What let's start with, if you may, of the first Africans arriving, who they were, and how did they get here to the Americas.
Okay. Who they were was obviously Africans. How did they get here? They did not come from across the Bering Straits in the beginning. Okay, because the Bering Straits were covered with snow and ice. The ice was and snow were they say uh, very extremely deep, so deep no one could walk in them. Okay, so we're talking about also a stretch of 2,000 miles. So if you have 2,000 miles of no animals, okay, because if you're in the ice and snow, what are the carnivorous animals going to eat? They have no plants, nothing to eat. So there are no carnivorous animals, and I mean, I'm sorry, vegetarian animals such as deer and elk and things of that nature. But if you have no deer or elk or any type of vegetarian animals to satisfy the hunger of the carnivorous animals, then the carnivorous animals cannot be there either because they'll die. And without either one, no plants and no animals, how would a human be able to survive that 1 to 2,000 mile march across the snow and ice? That is ridiculous. That did not happen. Then they come up with this. Well, maybe they did the island hopping. Oh no, there's a video on TV of some I forget what they were selling, but they showed a picture of Alaska, and they said this is Alaskan spring, and they showed that it was a gigantic glacier about a mile high, and it was on the land all the way into the ocean. So what had to do for them to island hop or come around the islands on the shores and miss all the snow, they couldn't do that because the snow and ice was out where the land ended. So they couldn't possibly have done that. So they did not come that way first. And we were talking about when did they first come?
Yes.
The peer-reviewed. Let me cover this first. The peer-reviewed studies, and that means that they cannot be questioned because peer-reviewed is accepted by the universities and colleges
Explain,
all over the planet.
explain. Could you explain to our audience what is a peer review article?
Yes, peer-reviewed article has to be read by your peers, your peers in academia, and they all have to sign off saying that your information is true, correct, and thorough.
Yes.
So
Okay.
that's
Very
the
good.
peer review. So the peer reviewed information I have about the oldest people in the Americas is going to blow your mind, and that is between 250,000 years ago.
250,000.
50,000 years ago is the lowest point, and the highest point is 350,000 years ago. And these were animal bones that they found, and also some spearheads that were in the carcass of the animal bones. And They did the thermoluminescence test with the stone arrowheads, and they found that was the case. And then they did a carbon 14 um, um, study, and they found the exact same thing. So we have two different types of sciences that come together and show that beyond a shadow of a doubt there was someone in the Americas, and 200 at least 250,000 years ago. Now I think that goes a little farther back than that ridiculous 1619 date.
Mhm.
And we did not come as slaves. We came as, and we didn't come as conquerors. We came as people looking for the expansion of land to grow and different things, because Africa is many millions of years old.
Well, let me
And
ask you. Let me
yes,
ask you this, Doctor. Who do you think these people were who speared the animals and were and who do you think those where do those people come from that during that time period that were present in the Americas? How do we extrapolate who they were to those tools that they left and the evidence that they left that there was a human existence there?
okay. Were you able to get to bring up the slide? Do you have it? The one that shows the map and the
Yeah, I can bring that slide
yeah.
up.
That slide
Uh,
would be extremely helpful if you could bring that up while I'm talking about this.
okay,
Okay.
let me
So,
bring it up.
all right. So these people obviously they came from Africa because the Walam Olam. Well, I won't even bring that in right now. Um, the first people on the planet were Africans, and we see that by very many pieces of evidence. And the best one is the um, DNA genetic evidence from Cavelli Sforza, who is the prominent um, not geologist but anthropologist and a scientist, and he has written a book that is this thick. Okay, it's almost 500 pages. It's called The History and the History of Human Genes. And on page 135, it emphatically says that there was no white skin until 3000 BC. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
no white skin until 3000 BC. And why is that? Because there were only Africans on the planet from the beginning. Okay, and they were dark, and there were some Africans who at higher elevations would be a little lighter. Also, you would get the cosign who were in the jungles. Some of them were in the jungles. They weren't as dark um, as the Africans in the Sahara or other places where they have the sun. Were dark, had brown skin, and they were there in situ in Africa. Now somehow they started going all over the planet in boats, and their boats were not the type of boats you'd see today, made out of steel, obviously, not even made out of wood, but they were made out of bamboo type pieces that were were fresh. Because if you try to make a boat out of bamboo, let's even say a raft out of old bamboo that is dried out, then it will be um, liquid, thirsty. Okay, so it would want to take on the water. But if you have a green bamboo piece, you see it's green and it's filled with resin. So if for anything, it's not only taking on water, it's sweating. So they were able to put together boats first on up and down the Nile, where they started with just probably canoes,
Mm-hmm.
and they built larger and larger boats until they went up into the Mediterranean.
Let
And
me know when you'd like to have that slide brought
right
in.
now,
Oh,
right
okay.
there.
All right. There you go. All right. I will bring it on.
Okay.
Okay.
There you go. That's a perfect example of showing you how they got here. And there was a Nigerian doctor about 20 years ago. I wanted to prove that Africans could have easily come over to the Americas, and he put his boat. If you look down at the almost the beginning of that swash that's coming across the blue swash coming across with the arrows at the end on the left. They're coming out of the southern tip of the bulge of Africa, and they started off there. And he had a a boat, a reed boat, and his reed boat was I don't know what 20, 30 feet long, and he had supplies in there with food, and he had water. But just in case anything would happen like that, so that he would run out of his supplies, he had a supply ship that was trailing him, and they would hand down the water to him if he needed it or the food. And also, if there were any tidal waves or bad weather or whatnot, he could do that. But they made it across and without anything happening. But here's how they made it across. He knew that there was a river or a current going from Africa
Mm-hmm.
to the Americas, but he had to prove it. So in this boat, he did not have an oar, he did not have a a rudder, he did not have an engine, he had nothing. He sat back in the boat, and after a mile or two offshore, the current smacks you and pulls you out and almost jerks you off the boat. And
Mhm.
it took him only 52 days to to um, to be in this craft, and it pushed him all the way into the Caribbean in 52 days. Now, what
Excellent.
happens if you put a gigantic sail on there, like say Columbus's boat, if you will, a gigantic sail? You would cut that in half, and maybe even to 2/3, and you would get there far close faster. So you can see that migration was not as hard as walking through 1 to 2 thousand miles of snow.
Now you know that that is a common retort from what's called transatlantic slave trade or trade deniers or discovery of America deniers, who say that this that the voyage from Africa to the Americas was 3 months and 6 months, and how people couldn't survive during that time. So there's a contingent, small contingent, and I don't know if he's even, but I know I should bring it up because we're here.
Very good.
But I'm glad you dispelled that by saying that even a boat without rudders or oars or anything, because of the current, would come to America in about 52 days. And if they had sails like those merchant marine boats who brought the captured Africans here during the fourth population wave of Africans, um, they would have reached here in probably around 30 days or more or less on the other side, 40 days at the outset, that they would arrive here much faster. But I just wanted to make
If I
that.
could,
Go ahead. Go
mhm.
ahead. Sure.
If I could, if everyone would look at the map, you can see that if they came from northern Africa and wanted to travel to New York, that it was twice. It looks like it's twice as far. But if you see on the lower, on the right hand side where the swash starts off, that's like near Nigeria. Okay, and that's in the bulge of Africa. And you can see that if you land in the bulge of South America, you could easily make it in half the time it would take you to go from the northern part of Africa to New York.
Okay.
So
All right. Let's go back to the earliest peoples, that the peopling of the Americas.
mhm.
Um, it appears that they came to South America first rather than North America. And if you could describe that route, the first route into the Americas.
You see it before you on the map.
Hmm.
It comes to you. They came in. Obviously, they came in. It looks like that there's a large wind, so they're giving you some grace. I'm not saying it was in just one little area. It's a large area from the bulge in South America to it looks like to just below probably to Haiti, to Haiti.
Okay.
So yeah.
I know when we discussed that, you informed me that these were the Khoisan people, the little people. Could you describe the Khoisan and tell and explain to the audience why in your research you believe that these were the first travelers into the Americas?
Okay, well, the Twa, and the yeah, of course, the Khoisan, and those were the small people. Okay, the what we used to call them was pygmies, but that's not the nice name. They call them diminutive people, and these were the first humans on the planet. And a very easy way to prove that is that uh, what is it? The I'm trying to think of the Godzilla type of dinosaur. Did that was not the first dinosaur on the planet. Dinosaurs evolved from the animals in the sea crawling up uh, into the land, and then slowly differentiating into different animals. So the first dinosaurs were little lizards. They were small,
Mhm.
Everything starts small and eventually it grows and grows and grows. And
Yes,
that is
yes.
exactly what happened in this case. So these small people, what the Olmec, they call the Olmec people the mother civilization of of the Americas. But when the Olmec got here, there were already those small people there. So I correct that and I say, well, the people there, we will call them the grandmother civilization of
Yes.
the Americas. So that's how that these small people went all over the planet to every um, continent on the planet, and
Now,
they made civilizations. Go ahead.
now you said something startling about 5 minutes into your presentation about the uh, white skinned people, what you call Caucasian or European, only appearing in around 3000 BC.
Right.
So we know that Europe was populated by human beings before then. So could you explain who that early population was in Europe?
Well, obviously it was the Khoisan and the other group I spoke of,
The Twi.
the Twa. Yeah. And because like I said, they had gone everywhere, and and they were there so long. They were there before the ice age hit 115,000 years ago. So after 115,000 years, back to approximately about 8,000 years, it was and in that type of weather, you have clouds all the time. You don't have sunshine, blue skies, and you cannot get a tan. So they
Mhm.
lost their color. They lost their humanity. They lost their history. They lost all those things. That's why when the Africans came up in and after the snow had melted, or as they came down, as they came out of the mountains, you know, down into Italy, down into Greece, down to Spain, they were called as Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, the whites called them, the Africans called them veritable savages because they were eating raw meat. They didn't know they had lost everything. They were in the this terrible situation, and it's a wonder that they survived. But they did survive.
And they became the modern day Europeans?
Yes, they did. They became the what modern day Europeans and Caucasians.
Excellent. The Twi and the Croissant are just very amazing people to me, and but we have evidence. And one of your favorite lines is that you have more evidence of our sojourn here into the Americas than Heinz has ketchup. So could you go into some of your evidences of the African presence in the Americas?
Okay, well, the first and the only one we really need is the genetics,
Hmm.
and it shows scientifically who they were. Okay, and then you get into the things about what they look like and how for how long they had been we'd been here. The You can see just in plain logic that Africans were here longer because the Caucasians they have majorly one skin tone, which is white or tan if they can get a tan, and the different coloring of their hair and their eyes. That's it. They didn't have long, they had not been on this planet long enough to differentiate into so many different peoples like the Africans can't have. The Africans have been here so long, they have differentiated from people who were their first people who were 3.5 to 4.5 feet tall, the Twa and the Khoisan and the Anu, ANU, okay? Because we didn't mention them. They were
Could you
that
tell us
small.
the Anu, from what I understand, were from Japan, that area, Japanese.
The AINU, okay,
Okay,
they were in Japan, but they were Africans too first, and short Africans. And
yeah, they look.
slowly,
They still have some of the attributes there. Well, but you
oh,
were
no, no,
referring.
no, they were pure Africans. And
Okay,
slowly but surely, when the Asians start mixing with them, they got a little lighter, and they call them the Anu, AINU. but the Anu,
Ah,
Anu. There's two different Anu.
okay. Very good. Good distinguishment. Go ahead. Continue, Professor.
So that was about it. Next question.
Okay. The uh, what evidences other than the DNA, uh, and I know, and I think I can repeat maybe a few of them. There was a meta where the bones were found in the earth, because you got to go down, because history, is I teach as well, is recorded in the layers of the earth. And if we dug exactly where we're at today, we would be able to, wherever we're at today, wherever our audience is at in North America, if you dig down in the earth far enough, you can see who was there, because you'll start discovering artifacts of what they ate. You'll start discovering animal bones, and you talked about animal bones, and then you'll discover how these animals were killed. You'll start seeing, these are some of the tracings of the Americans. You start seeing the tools. When we talk about, uh, in this area of work, anthropology and archaeology, when you talk about human beings, you talk about, uh, uh, the evidences of their tool making. That's one of the big things. And so,
Mm-hmm.
and when you talked about the spears that were found 230,000 years ago, you mentioned a couple of tests that were done. Could you tell our audience about the tests, and how do we, as scientists, as you as scientists, and me as a lawyer, are able to use this to date the presence of human beings in the soil?
Okay, well, as I said, you had the thermoluminescence, you have a carbon 14, and then there are several others that have come out since then, and that was back in the 50s and 60s when they first started making those tests. Um, that I don't know. I cannot tell you that I know all of the information in the world. So I have a view of who the first Americans were, and I have the list. But I don't carry the list with me, and I did not what do you call it, memorize it, but it's in my book.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Okay, now we talked about South America as being the first place that the Africans actually showed up.
Yes.
How did they make it to the Caribbean and to North America, and who were these tribes, and what did these, and and as they evolved, what how did they evolve through the millennia to finally come into North America?
Okay. Obviously, they come into the north uh, eastern part of South America, as you can see on this swash and map, and they would go south, west, and north, and they would go by land, or they could go by sea, and by land they could go all the way walking, because there was no Suez Canal at that time where they had to go over a canal. You can literally walk from South America up to Central America up into North America. So you would have people who had made that walk that way, and then also there is a story where they said the Americans, first not the first Americans, but also black folks who were up in the Netherlands, okay, went to the northern route to the Americas, which is far closer than going the way that the other brothers went through. And they would hit let's see, Iceland, Greenland, um, and then Canada, and then down into the Americas. So those are two different ways that they came, and they were on boats as well. Now, if they did it during the Ice Age, they wouldn't have as easy a way to get through those places, because there were, as I said, there was ice all over, and in canoes. they wouldn't have made it as well, especially in that frigid weather. You know? And what fish are you going to find in the ice? So, but, most of them would have come through the southern route, or maybe into the middle route. But the southern route is far closer. If you as we're looking at the map, the bulge of Africa and the bulge of South America are far closer than the northern part of Africa and the area we would say such as Florida or to New York.
Okay. I see you have the Olmec statue, but the Olmec statuettes,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll let you elaborate on them. To me, they are fairly new, and we're really talking about the people that came before that. Well, I'm fascinated with another entry point, which is the which is from Africa, but out of East Africa and Southeast Asia into Australia and into the tip of South America. And when I got down there, is I seen that in Antarctica, and this is phenomenal, that there was a discovery of Africans in Antarctica around 1900 that had no clothes on, that had been there for eons and eons and eons, to show that the little people that we first talked about had adapted and had morphed and had adapted to the earth as they made their trip around the world, and particularly into the Americas. And if you could take us to the people and the populations that that did that, and were right before the Olmecs, and if you could also explain to us how many years are we referring to when we go back, when we first talk about the Olmecs as well.
The scientists and whatnot, they give such an early date for the Olmecs, which is around 2000 some years ago, and I mean 2000 BC, and that is just absolutely ridiculously wrong because the Olmecs were in Africa a long time before they became the Olmecs, and we're talking about again the grandmother civilization. Okay, the Olmecs are a combination of three peoples. They are the Africans who were here first, the Africans who later came and joined their DNA and their bloodline, and also the Asians who came in. All right. So, but you have tribes in South America, um, and also and there's another point that I'll be covering later on in this presentation. There were some people think that when the Asians came over in 3000 BC, 2600 BC, no, it was 2600 BC is when they came over. That the two groups, the Africans and the Asians, get together, and their offspring that become the Native Americans. Now,
Mm-hmm.
what's really crazy is what I saw all my life when I was in kids. Today, even they see the cowboy in Indian movies. Have you ever seen a black Indian in a cowboy movie?
No, I haven't.
And you won't, because they do not want you to know this history. Do you understand what I'm telling you? There were black Indians here. These Africans, as I said, came at least 250,000 years ago. All right, and they had um, uh, to hold on to their lifestyle and the way they dressed, et cetera, for all those many years. But in Africa, Africa is so freaking large that slowly the Africans there started morphing into other people and doing other things than these small contingency who made it over into the Americas. Now, so the Americas also, they started differentiating as well as far before the Asians came. They they were started to wear feathers. They were the first ones to wear the war bonnets and all these different things. These people are not shown on television. However, you have a later context, and this is I'm touching on what I was going to cover later on, and that would be the Africans in Louisiana. There is a phenomenal lady. Oh my God, Chief
Mhm.
Gilliam, and they call it Chief Gilliam is her name, or African not well African Indian name is Chief Warhorse, and you better believe she is appropriately named. This sister does not play. She doesn't take any excuses from anyone, and she will blast you in a nice way. But if you come off wrong, let me tell you a thing that she did. Um, she wanted to show us some of the old forts that the Native Americans made, to keep these other people out. And we pulled into the area where the fort was, which was on the what is it, the lake, the Pontchartrain, and the, uh, the man came out, the what do you call it, the guard or whatever came out to welcome us and to make sure that we had the correct papers and everything to come in and look at the place, and she got up and she started talking to him, and he started this BS about the Indians, and she said, no, Redskin Indians, no. We were here first, the Black Indians, blah, blah, blah. And he said something else, and she shut him down. She started talking and giving him fact after fact, evidence after evidence. And after a while, she started poking him in his chest, every word she said, just like this. And the man was 6'2", and he got beat red, and we were almost laughing, but we couldn't laugh because it wasn't appropriate. But it was hard not to laugh the way she was undressing him and let him know exactly what the history was. So she's I will talk about her later, and I'll have the tribe and the defunct nation that she was in. She was a Shatta, not Choctaw. This is another thing that the whites mispronounced the name of the original Native Americans, or even the Redskins, who had turned a little light because of the infusion of the Asians, and they called themselves they were Shatta, but as I said, the correct name is Shatta, Shatta, not Choctaw. Okay, so anyone who calls them Choctaw does not know their history.
That now we are at the point, dear audience, of what the reparations claim to land has become in North America. Because as lawyers, the only thing that we have to prove, we went back 250,000 years, but really the only evidence that as lawyers that we have to prove in any type of international forum or international court or before the United States or whatever body is that we were here prior to the colonial peoples. And when we talk about these tribes in Louisiana and the Chata and the tribes of Chickasaw, and this was one of the reasons why I asked about, and these really I'm really referring to the people called the Mayans and the Aztecs, and because I that was the from what I understand, and you're the professor, but from what I understand, after the Olmec, which was the grandmother of
No, no,
the mother,
the mother civilization.
the mother civilization
Right.
of the people called Indians.
Mhm.
Okay, as they spread out from uh, Mexico and South America and came into the United States, that's a very important period for us to prove that that this population was the premier population in the Americas, and that they were African admixtures that had morphed, and as you talked about, had differentiated because of the Asian admixture that had came into that they had merged with, and so now um, these people are the people, from what I presume, and I'll let you elaborate, are the peoples, are those tribes, are those Indians, are those indigenous people that began filtering into and walking into the Americas from different places and from different voyages into the Americas. So could you elaborate on that, my brother, as how these people came into the Americas at this early time?
Okay, you're talking about the very first people, the grandmother civilization.
The ones that came out of that civilization, not that first civilization, but those tribes and those peoples that came out of that civilization when North America was vacant, and they came from out of South America
Mhm.
into the Caribbeans and into North America.
Okay, and you wanted to know exactly what about that?
Who these people were, what did they look like, how they had differentiated, what were their admixtures, who were they made of, up of, what races or what entities made up those people at this stage and period in the millennium that now began to filter into the United States and North
We're,
America.
we're talking about before Columbus and the Vikings.
Oh yes, oh yes, yes. But I want you
Okay.
to elaborate on that.
Okay. Well, obviously, it's as I've already covered. And you're looking at the map, they came in that direction. Okay. Um, but there are other um, sites that have said that some of a few far later that there were Africans and other peoples who came from the Australia route, but that is like about 9 times farther than even the Atlantic route.
Right.
Not 5 to 9,000 something. I forget the amount, but we're talking about from Australia all the way past the Philippines and past Hawaii, all the way to California. That is a long voyage. Okay, and if you wanted to take the shorter voyage across from what is now Russia into Alaska, you couldn't again because of the snow.
Mhm.
So the people here again who you had first were the short Africans, and as I told you later, they started growing and morphing into some of the people that are in Africa today, and some of them have grown all the way up to 6 and 7 feet, like the some of the basketball players you can see now in the leagues coming from Africa, being 7 feet tall. So
Yeah,
it's a long story.
yeah. But I want you now to pinpoint the people that merged out of the Olmecs that filtered into North America.
Okay, the Olmecs, as I said before, the Olmecs did not exist as a different entity until those three groups that I mentioned came to the Americas. Everyone who came from the East was in the beginning were pure Africans, and no Olmecs came from there. The people who became the Olmecs, and I already mentioned those three. Those are the ones who were the Olmecs, and then you have the ones who were there before the Asians and anyone else. Okay, they were the small Africans, the Twa, the Anu, the Khoisan. Does
Okay.
that answer your question?
Well, I guess what the distinguishment that we look at is a distinguishment between the pure Africans and the admixtured Africans, because the Afro descendants, and there's 250 million of them now in the Americas, in North America and South America, are the admixtures, are the ones that have differentiated uh, and had morphed with the Asians and the third group, the older Africans, and the transatlantic slave trade, all those populations, uh, because when we talk about identity, who the African Americans are, and I hate to use that term, while the Afro-descendant Americans are, we see that there's a differentiation
Mm-hmm.
between the pure Africans
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
from the continent and those Pan American, I can use that term, Pan American
Mm-hmm.
Africans. And so,
If I can interject, as
yeah.
you're on that point, that specific point, also look at the Mexicans. The Mexicans many of those Mexicans are dark. They have the long hair and they are short.
Mhm. Well,
How
well,
about that?
well.
They were the ones who mixed directly from the Africans who had come over and the Asians who come in. So the Asians were at that time, their first Asians were small as well. So these people, if you go to Mexico today, you will see small Mexicans. Some of them are taller, but a good amount are very small Mexicans, but 4 feet tall.
Hmm. Well, actually, I'm talking about the not only the Mexicans but the Ecuadorians,
Hmm.
Uruguay,
Yeah.
all over South America. There's 250 million, according to the
Hmm.
International Court Organization of American
Hmm.
States. We have a new name, which is Afro Descendants. A lot of people, and I want to familiarize why the court, the United Nations Court, have called these people who have these admixtures in South America Afro descendants, and how they are distinguished from African, the pure African, because when we looked at the preciseness of the legal argument, we came to a realization after talking with you and Dr. Winters, and of course referring back to Ivan Van Serta, which was another one of our esteemed brothers.
Absolutely.
We see that this distinguishment has a identity, a frame around it that is a distinguishment from the pure Africans. And when we looked at the early American law, we seen that there was a distinguishment in the first Naturalization Act in 1790. Um, it was when they said that there were African descendants and African natives. And the African natives were the distinguishment of the pure Africans that had just came as captured Africans to the Americas and had not mixed or merged as of yet with the differentiated Pan American, Black Indians,
Hmm.
Asian, African mixture that was already there on the continent, and
Hmm.
that is a very um, a telling distinguishment that we have not been able to grasp because of the educational system that we're
Right.
under. But but as you talked about, there's a distinguishment from being
Yes.
over in America so long,
Mm-hmm.
and the admixtures and the differentiations, which are different than the differentiations in Africa on that continent, that there that they that we as a people have become those people that have been differentiated on in the Americas.
But you can see these darker people who are in the South America, central, close to middle South America, northern South America, and also in Mexico. But you look in the north western part of Mexico on the shorelines. Have you ever heard of the Mexican called the Costa Chicanos?
No, I haven't. No, I
Okay,
haven't.
they are the short, dark Mexicans. Dark Mexicans
I,
with long black hair. The Costa Chicanos have kept everything in their DNA except for their hair. How about that? Is
well,
that
well,
part of your discussion?
Yeah, what this it serves this that
Mm-hmm.
there were different population waves, and that there were
Mm-hmm.
different pockets of people that didn't differentiate as much as other parts as
Mm-hmm.
other people, and it proves that there were the small people, the original people from Africa, who
Mm-hmm.
still remain small, except for, like you said, for their heritage, the Costa Chicanos, and we've seen some of them in Panama and in different parts of South America too. People, these isolated pockets of native people and populations that haven't differentiated as much as others. Um,
I've got pictures of some of them from Mexico in this book, and they come up almost to my shoulder, the top of their heads,
mhm,
and they are 4 feet tall. Those are
mhm.
the ones just like you're talking about, the same subject here as you're saying there, the admixtures and whatnot.
Okay. Well, well, that's very important because we are those admixtures now that have been given this identity as Afro descendants. And your esteemed research, as well as Dr. Winter's esteemed research, gives us an idea of how these mergers came to be, and when they started, and who these people were, which is excellent for our people who are struggling with who they are, and have only been taught that they came here after 1619. um, but I want you to continue with. I think you were. We were still at the Olmecs and the people that differentiated out of the Olmecs.
Okay. Well, the when the Asians and Caucasians entered um, the Americas, one from the west, the Asians, and the whites from the right, from the east. Um, they did not see bumbling cavemen, okay, or savages. What did they see? They saw, and not as many towns and cities we have now, but they saw in all three Americas, they saw great pyramids, they saw temples, they saw farms, they
Mhm,
saw cities, they even saw roads and bridges
mhm,
that were left behind. Some of the in South America, some of the forests are so thick they when the people left, the forest overgrew their buildings and whatnot. And, now some of the Americans are coming down. They're going in there and they're looking into the cutting down some of the things off of the buildings and going inside and making great finds. You know, the fathers have come to show everyone who was who. What? No. All I have to do is go to the outskirts and get some of the natives to explain what happened in that area. So these these um these great pyramids and temples, all of those things came from people before we had the problems with the Caucasians coming over and taking over, and which is unfortunately what some of them do. Not all of them, not most of them. And let me say something. This, I don't want to hear this stuff about all white people are bad, and I don't want to hear about any stuff about all or that all black people are good. There are some wonderful Caucasians, and there are some terrible black folks that I've come into contact in my life. So people are people. So we need to get away from this race bullshit. Excuse me, but you'll have to take that off or bleep it out. But that is all garbage. You know, there are good people in every state of life, in every place on this planet. So to get back to this infusion of these different people in South America, the way uh, that I shall prove they're different from all others Native Americans is that they're historically different. They predate each and every group that first entered to the Americas, and that's what I shall be showing in a little while. And as a matter of fact, African Americans deserve more than any other group for reparations. simply because of our extremely long history. And we can prove it in blood, we can prove it in looks, we can prove it in artifacts, we can prove it in buildings, we can prove it in so many things. So there's no way that they can win in this case unless they cheat, which is what they do. So I've heard some people say that the red man predated the white man here, so they should get the reparations right. And I said that's not true. Genetically speaking, Africans are the oldest indigenous peoples in the Americas, not the red man. No, they should not get it. Okay, they might
Who is
they
the
would be
red
a part
man?
of it. The red, as I explained earlier, okay, the red man are Asians who come over, okay, and they came over, like I said, they they have a lighter skin, they have long black hair, all right, and some of them are shorter and some of them are taller. But when they came in, they merged with the Africans that are there, and it is their children that become the red man or the Native American Indians.
Mhm.
Okay, when I go to powwows, you know, I have Navajo on my mother's side and Arapaho on my father's side. So when I go to these powwows, I'm accepted. But then when I start talking about did the where the first Americans, I mean Indians come from, they say what line do they say? We've always been here. And I say, and you are always wrong when you say that statement. That is not correct. And that's when I pull out my long list of evidence to show that they have not always been here, just like the Caucasians have not always been here. And even us Africans have not always been here, but they surely came here before the Caucasians, the Asians, and they were made and they were made the say convolution of bloods between the Asians and whites. Okay, so Asians and blacks. So it's a totally different phenomenon that's going on. So um, the, um, the the red man predated the white man here. So they should get reparations, right? Not true, because here again, genetically speaking, Africans are the oldest indigenous people in America. So that's over. So here on the planet, um, on planet Earth, that matters. And people say, well, wait a minute, do you mean the cowboys and westerns we see in well, the kids were all wrong? Yes, the cowboy and Indians, and what we see the TV, they look pretty authentic, but the Indians who were all were portrayed as just red Indians and no other Indians are all wrong. They were portrayed as the red man and not as blacks, like the Indians down in Louisiana, and some of them, Chief Warhorse's people, are not mixed. They're not mixed. There are still 100% Africans without mixing their blood in the Americas today. And boy, is that going to get heavy when we prove that, or
Well,
if they even
explain
let
it.
us prove it.
Explain the Louisiana Black Indians that you've encountered, and the reason why they have some of them had not mixed, and some of them, as you explained before, have mixed. But explain who they are and some of their attributes.
Okay. Um, let's see. Caucasians developed during the Ice Age, as I said. Okay, and then you have the Asians who come over. Now, the Asians look like they do because they mixed with the Africans, and a few of the Asians. Babies develop a genetic defect. And you know what? This is before they even came here. As they were in Asia, they developed a thing called Down syndrome. Some of them, not all of them. Some of them got a Down syndrome. And if you look at some white folks or even some black folks with Down syndrome, and I have to prove this point. I have a cousin who has two sisters. The two sisters look perfectly normal. They're beautiful. And this pretty poor little sweetheart, the third daughter, is light skinned. She has a small head with a flat in the back, whereas the other ones have the dicephalic heads. The other two sisters like this, they're taller, and this one has. She doesn't have any Chinese in her blood, but the Down syndrome makes her look Chinese because she has a small head, she has slanted eyes, she has a lighter skin, she has a shorter, thick neck, and her arms and her legs are short, and that is Down syndrome. But some of the people call the Mongoloid babies. Now, where's Mongolia? Uh-oh. Well, you can go into that with wherever you want to go. But the black babies can have those Asian or Mongoloid features as well. So the Down syndrome certainly does not affect any Asians, just a few. So now we have to go into three prominent different peoples who should not be called a different so-called race. Um, but politely say they're different genetically because of their environment and where they live. So you see the people along the equator developed a dark skin. This is way back, way back. They developed dark skin because of the direct angle of the sun. Then people a little bit up higher or lower from the equator, then those people are about halfway down, and they are a little lighter. Okay, but then when you get down all of the way, they're not black, they're not dark, they are light, and they are very light, and they became the white. So it's really something that we call people say people that are different race. There's no such thing as race. The environment is what caused all these different things.
Mhm.
So you see that there's no such thing as race, and the environments which cause them are causing problems in the some people today. But if you're a learned person, you could see that of course this is all environmentally centered.
Well,
Now,
it's a big difference between science and politics. But go ahead,
yes,
doctor.
yes. Okay, so different environments cause different skin colors. And so let's now get back to the historic story. The Africans that are on every continent in the world today, whenever any other people, Chinese or whites, go to another continent, they will invariably see black folks there. Okay, and they did not only build pyramids. Okay, they build pyramids on every continent in the world, including Antarctica. They didn't just build pyramids in Egypt, they built pyramids in every single continent on the planet, including Antarctica. Okay?
What about the South American pyramids and the mounds? Are they similar? Are they similar
They're a little
edifices?
different. They're a little different.
Who were they built by, and how did they become to take up on, if you will, those architectural differences?
Well, you have Africans coming from Africa, and they knew where they came from and what their culture was and how they built. So they came over here and they built similar buildings, mounds first, and then they started just like how mounds were the first pyramids in Africa as well, and they slowly morphed into um, building those different things. And there are pyramids in all three Americas. All three Americas have pyramids, but most of them have been taken down. Now in Mexico, you have Tiwanaku, which has been saved, and there's several pyramids there in Tiwanaku area that I've been to, and they are very large and very wide, but they are pyramids nonetheless.
When you say
So
pyramids, are they different than the temple architectural structure?
yes,
Okay, the triangular pyramid structure.
no, not triangle. Pyramids are have four corners,
Okay,
and they go up to a point.
point. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, yeah. That's what I was referring to. Good, good, good. So there's different architectural structures, and I didn't know this. I didn't know that there was the that structure in the Americas.
Mhm.
I only knew of the temple like steps. structured pyramids that are called temples.
Hmm. Okay. All right. So at first, when I saw the pyramids in Antarctica, I thought that Antarctica was filled with large mountains, because of the global warming. However, those large mountains, some of them melted down halfway, and while we can see on all four sides that they're not mountains, they are pyramids. And guess what? You don't believe me? Just watch. Go to Google and put in Google. Go to Google Earth after you go to Google and put in pyramids in Antarctica, and you will
My
see.
goodness.
You'll see them.
My goodness. My goodness.
Yes.
That's amazing. But it follows because in Antarctica, as I was referring to earlier, the black people were still there around 1900
Yeah.
and had adapted and had
Hmm.
adapted. So this opening, this type of information should be in all of our schools, and this is one of the reasons why we have chosen to nationalize and confederate, because we need our own schools,
Yes.
because the present schools are really debilitating our children with
Yes.
this 1619 and George Washington and Thomas,
Yes.
all these slaveholders who they want us to revert to. Yeah, this is so we are anticipating that our first move would be to, as all indigenous people have, and this is the reason why your research and Dr. Winter's research is so key,
Mhm.
is that once we prove this indigenous status, we can obtain the funding for indigenous schools, because all indigenous people have the right under international law and American law, under all kind of law, under just law period. We have the right to preserve our culture.
Mhm.
And one of my colleagues has said that North America, especially, is one big crime scene, because uh, there's burial grounds and there's artifacts that are being bulldozed over,
Yes.
and then there's all of this historical evidence of crimes and massacres and big
Mhm.
pits like Devil Punch Bowl that have been um, um, e- uh, put eradicated from the history books that our children are taught. So we get this flowery look of this Caucasian America that really never was, except in the minds of the Caucasian themselves.
Mhm.
So this is why your research is so important, and we're so delighted to 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 go through these explanations, and because at a point, this research, as you put into your book, first Americans were Africans, are going to we want to actually make them school books
Mhm.
for K to 12 and for college, because our college students, even our law students, have no idea of this rich history. So when even our lawyers make arguments before the American courts, they cannot go back and make indigenous arguments. We're just now getting to the point, because of our erudition in human rights, where we can make claims of land in the United States, Detroit, which is Detroit's. All these are native language. Chicago is another native language city. Massachusetts. All of these are Indian and Black Indian names
Mhm.
that came into the Americas. And so, if you may, could you kind of explain, prior to the evolution of the modern tribes, there were certain tribes called the Mississippians and the Yamasee. I don't know if you're familiar with those. Is that within your erudition?
No, it's not in my book, but let me go back and pull these two pieces together.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Okay. Um, So as I said, you can see that there are pyramids in Antarctica, but this was a worldwide pyramid culture that we have today, and people don't know that. And who built these pyramids all over the planet? Okay, like I said, they're in the pyramids can be seen in every continent on the planet, including Antarctica. So
Hmm.
who built them? Well, I'll tell you who did not build them. No Caucasians built them, no Asians built them, and no Red Indians built them because they were here way before they were. Thousands, tens of thousands of years before. And guess what else? You can even see pyramids underwater. You can see
Ah.
pyramids underwater in right off Japan, off off China, and in China there's pyramids. Okay, and India and Portugal, off of Cuba, and right off of Egypt's delta as well. And guess what? Even in the Bahamas, there's a pyramid that you cannot go to because, and this is in the water, this is just about a mile off the coast of the Bahamas. There's a pyramid, and they have you can't, if you go near it, they put a Coast Guard watch there, or building or whatnot, and they make sure that you can't go to that area and go dive down to a pyramid because there is a old wives' tale that someone went into there and put out a crystal ball, and didn't have properties like the crystal balls on TV, but they still got a crystal ball out of one, maybe, possibly. But anyway, there are pyramids even in Bahamas. And in 1886, the great white American scholar Godfrey Higgins, and a lot of intellectual black folks know about Godfrey Higgins, but this is what he wrote. He wrote, and I quote, "We have found the black complexion, or something close to it, wherever we have approached the origin of nations. In short, and I say in short, all the deities we found were black, and they remained black since very ancient times." Now, Columbus, that's the end of quote. That was Godfrey Higgins. Now, Columbus did not discover America, okay? What he did discover were Africans. Columbus, as a matter of fact, never set foot on one of the three Americas. What he did discover was Haiti. So can we please give poor Columbus a proper burial and finally erase him from our history as saying he discovered anything here? But wait, what do you call the Vikings? The Vikings were also certainly here before Columbus. And they island hopped from Norway to Iceland to Greenland, as I said, the blacks did, and to Canada, of course. So let's please, for once and all, give Africans the award for discovering North America, Central America, South America, Hawaii, Asians, Europe, and even the North Pole, where Matthew Henson, another man who was black, who was the first human to stand on the North Pole, Matthew Henson, by the way. And of course, we already have covered the pyramids on the South Pole. So it's well known that the first folks to build pyramids in the were Africans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Well,
Yeah.
surely it was not the Mexicans, the Asians, or Caucasians, or even anyone who lives on the moon could say that pyramids were built by anyone else other than Africans.
Okay.
So
In about 10 minutes, Professor, I'm going to open up the lines, the chat line. Let
okay,
me see. I'm going to go ahead. Um, you know what? When we were talking, once you were telling me about this fascinating um, um, piece of breakwork in the Bahamas, I think near Bimini. Could you
uh-huh.
explain to our audience on how the ancient ones uh, crafted such an advanced breakwork off the Bahamas?
Okay. It's called the Bimini Road. because when white folks went past, they looked down the water in 25 feet of water, and they saw um, a structure that was um, blocks, big blocks, and it went out from my arm like this, and then it split off like this, and it looked like actually a road, but it's 600 feet long, and and then this is a breakwater, is before it. Let me see. The breakwater is well, yeah. The breakwater comes after the pier. There's a pier first, around a mile off of the shore. We can see today in the water, and then about 400, 500 feet away from there, there is a large breakwater where the water would break when these structures were being used by the native people, the Africans there. Um, the they would have ships that would come, and I had a picture of that. We have don't have it today. It's in my book. The picture of seeing a way for the big ships from other parts of the Americas would come and trade with the people in the Bahamas. And how would they tie up? They wouldn't just tie up on the ends or the sides um, of the pier. They had a gap in between where they could go in between and dock their ships. And that dock can still be seen underneath the water, and so can the breakwater that's 50 yards away. That is just a big structure where the waves would hit that that structure, and then behind that structure where the waves hit, there were no waves for around 50 yards, and they could then go in and let their goods off there if they wanted to. So that the breakwater is there, so that the when they would anchor right near the shore, that they would try to unload their supplies. The ships would and the they call the rowboats would be going up and down like this with the ebb and tide of the waves. But when you have a breakwater there for 50 feet, there's like a big area where all you have to do is pull in to the shore and unleash your goods, and it's there. So that's a phenomenal thing to see. And the blocks are gigantic. The pier and the breakwater are built from gigantic uh, um, um, rectangular blocks that are probably about 4 to 8 tons large, and they are put together so closely that you couldn't even fit a dime in between. Now, what does that remind you of, brother?
Well, of course, that sounds like the
Pyramids.
yeah.
There you
There was
go.
there we
There
go
you,
again. There
there
we
we
go
go again. That's another piece of what evidence,
of
because
evidence,
right who
architectural evidence.
exactly. Now, this structure right off of Bimini um, is now in 25 to 30 feet of water.
Hmm.
Okay, and the reason is because of that. First of all, that shows how old it is. It is older than the last ice age.
My goodness, I didn't know it was that all. Okay.
Yes, and what happened was when the ice age melted, it was built before the ice age started. Okay, so then as ice age started, all right, after it, let me see, they built it, and then when the ice age started to melt, the waters came and flooded over this area, and for 30 feet now, it's water. But before the ice age, it was not water because we had the ice that sucked up huge zillions of tons of water, and it turned into ice. So the shores all over the planet went down, and people migrated to those shores or to a place like um, Bimini. But then the ice age hits, they flood, and go ahead. You had a question.
Well, there's a lot of questions here. Tasha Zai, who I really have been I like her work. She's a young sister, and she's done a lot of research in this area of indigenous status and indigenous people. And she asks you a question. She says, "Dr. Imhotep, you did an interview a few years ago about Chief Warhorse and the discovery of a Black Indian burial site. Is there an update about that project in Louisiana? Thank you."
Okay, not that I know of, because I don't live. She lives in Louisiana. I live all the way in Virginia, and we talk sometimes on the phone, but we haven't talked about that yet. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I'm sorry, I can't answer that.
Okay. Well, that's a fair question. It's something that we may be able to answer in the future, Sister
Mm-hmm.
Tasha.
Mm-hmm.
Robin Benton, he's another one of our. He was one of our human right defender candidates and still is, and he gave us some things from the Smithsonian about how white settlers bear truths about the Midwest mysterious mound cities. Uh,
Ah,
yeah, and he also gave us some new information about the equatorial, which is what your arrows on this represent the equatorial currents.
mm-hmm.
Then Michael Gaines, Ray Gaither. Let me see. Ebiku asked you, have you ever compared notes with Horace Butler?
No, I don't know the gentleman.
I don't know. I don't know him either. I think that he did a Martin piece, "The Rocks Cry." I think that's him.
Oh, the
Yeah,
rocks cry out. Oh
yeah,
yeah. Oh
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I think that. I think. Have you compared any of your work with any of your evidences with Dr. Butler's evidences?
No, I haven't read his book. All I know is his title.
Yeah. It's something that I have to read as well. Let
Mm-hmm.
me see. Let me see. Taft, Jackie, Angela Mollett. Angela Mollett is a historian. She
Mm-hmm.
is a member of the Freedmen Choctaw,
Ah,
Chickasaw Indian group. She's one. Their tribe was one of our first Confederate tribes. She gives you her greeting. And let me see, Ramel L. Um, gives you peace and greetings from Jackie and Michael Graves and Taft. And let me see if I can get you any more questions from these our distinguished audience. Let's see. Let's see. There's some files here. Smithsonian. Uh, the Baron. Oh, that was the Bering Strait
yeah.
concept. Okay. We talked about that was the one that they like to refer to as how the original Indians arrived here was through the Bering Strait. You talked about that in detail. Okay.
Understand if they came over, they were Chinese. They weren't Indians yet. If they came over the Bering Strait, you don't get Indians until the Asians come over and they start mixing their blood, and their children become the Indians.
Excellent point. Excellent point. What about the Ainu? Because the Ainu was like in
Mm-hmm.
that area and would have came to, and they're the dark African people. They're the African
Yes.
people in that are still in Japan, and they are in northern Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And if they traversed, they would have come that way. Could it have been that admixture of Chinese and African people who came over the Bering Strait?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it makes sense. They are located in northern Japan, right, and right as you go into Russia and into Alaska and into the Bering Strait areas. That made a lot of sense.
Now we're
Uh,
talking about after the you're talk. Are you talking about the time period after the Ice Age because they couldn't come before. I mean, during the Ice Age, they
Oh
could come
no,
before
no,
or after.
the after the Ice Age.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sure, they could come. Absolutely.
Right. Are you familiar with the Polynesian route of those Africans that went that way instead of coming straight from Africa? The other route where they came
Hmm.
from Australia into the Micronesians and became the
Yeah.
Samoans and the Fijis and the
Mhm.
Hawaiian people. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah. As time goes on and civilizations really blow up, then the people need to find more land, and they go out further and further and further. And then some people like to go way out. So people went from Africa to India to China and also to like Vietnam, whatnot. Then they go into the islands, the Philippines and Hawaii, and then eventually to the Americas. So that definitely happened for
Yeah,
sure.
it is fascinating because in each of these countries, there are still isolated groups of what they call negritos. In
Hmm.
the Philippines and in Malaysia and Vietnam and in China, they're still there.
Hmm.
They are still there, and this is the reason why we just love having you on in your research. And I'm going to see if we have a couple more questions. If anybody would like to ask a question, I think this would be the best time because we're going to to close down in about 10 minutes. Let's see is if we have any more questions. Is is Alton Maddox Jr. involved in the Afrodescendants Institute of Human Rights? No, attorney. We haven't contacted Attorney Maddox as of yet, but we will because now we are into the phase in which we are training a lot of lawyers on the indigenous status. And this is the reason why Dr. Imhotep's research is so key and Dr. Winter's research is so key, is because we can't accede to reparations in without having a place to be restored from. And so when we prove that we are indigenous, and this is the reason why I am going to be talking to Alton Maddox and the National Bar Association and the National Conference of Black Lawyers and the Black Lawyers for Justice, is to introduce them as well as to the professors at the colleges, is to introduce them because they're behind the research that you just have been privy to. They just don't have the information on our sojourn here in the Americas. In fact, there's one group now that's saying that we're descendants of slaves only, and that we began here in 1619, and that has become, I think it's the Ados group that goes with the 1619 marker, which we adamantly decry because that cuts off the ability to obtain land if the American land and it cuts off all the research that Dr. Imhotep has done, Dr. Winters has done, and Van Sertima has done that prove that we were in that Africans were in the Americas hundreds of thousands of years, 250,000 years before 1619 and the arrival of the Caucasians. So when you look at to a remedy, we can't just go back just to restore us to where we was at in 1619 and to just that just and so we just are just arriving captured people, and those are the people that only need to be remedied. No, we were here a long time before um, the colonial intrusion, and when he came, There were Indians. There were he enslaved the Indians. There were Black Indians here. There were a lot of mergers that we're going to go through on some of my upcoming lectures on how all of these mergers and all of these people, the Mayans and the Aztecs and the red man and the black man and all the people that were under the onslaught of colonialism mixed and became admixtures. And we became a product of that called now the Afrodescendants. But as you know, we went through the color, them naming us all these different names. And so when we talk about the reparations remedy, we have to acknowledge that, or we cut off our nose and spite our claims to land. And so we can't do that. So this is the reason why this research is so important. It's just not theoretical. This history has to go into our school books. This history has to go into our court cases, and we're going to make those presentations to brother attorney Alton Maddox, Dr. Malik Zulu Shabazz, his organization Black Lawyers for Justice, the National Bar Association, because they just don't know, and we want them to assist us with this new knowledge of making our claims land-based indigenous claims, so that we can now negotiate the billions and billions of dollars in lost land. And thank you, my brother. Lost land. Your research, and Dr. Clyde Winter's research has allowed us as attorneys to make these presentations. So let me give you a round of applause, because it goes to your research and your hard work, my brother. So we really enjoyed having you on, my brother. We're going to have you back. I know we wanted to put several more slides up to explain that. Put the cover of your book so that you can elucidate. Thank you, my brother. Elucidate this, but you can. Could you tell our audience when your book is coming on sale and where they could purchase it?
Yes. As I mentioned before, I am increasing the pages and the photos and whatnot, and it should be out sometime this fall.
Thank you, my brother. We're gonna have you back. We're back on, and definitely, we are going to. And this is a news flash to all of our audience and our readers. We are going to collaborate on several books that would allow us to obtain those land claims and those attachments to land that we are presenting before the United Nations, so that when we talk about reparative measures, we can include our land claims. We can include the schools and the educational systems that we've been deprived of. We can include all of that in our cultural, the harm to our culture and the genocide that has taken place when they distinguished us from our other brothers who were enslaved as well, and when they merged us as well, and made even those brothers and put them into our category as, and I'm talking about the recently arrived Africans category as colored, then renamed them as coloreds. So there's this unraveling that is now taking place right before your eyes. And we surely appreciated you attending the lecture by Dr. David Imhotep this morning. We're going to have him back, and we really appreciate you. And so we're going to sign off for today. Is there anything that you want to close with, Dr. Imhotep?
That's all. And that we have an arduous journey ahead of us, but we will not, we shall not be denied, and we will win this case.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you, my brother. Thank you, our listeners, for joining us this Saturday. You will be able to find this presentation and share this presentation on our YouTube channel. You can go to Dr. Mustafa Ansari. It's under my name, and you'll be able to see this presentation and be able to copy it. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you again, Dr. David Himmelf. It was a real pleasure.
My pleasure. Hotep.
Hotep.